All right. So far, it's just you and me, pal.
Okay, that's okay.
And people are starting to trickle in, including our good friend Philip Mattingly Sr.
He's doing it for the team.
Yes. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera because I am not the star of the show here. Yeah, people start trickling in. Welcome, everybody, to our third Lunch and Learn educational webinar concerning all things Medicaid. This one is going to be focused on pathways. And we have our resident expert, Wes Chapman. He's going to be leading the presentation. We'll get started in a couple of moments. We're still waiting for people to trickle in. But yeah, we look forward. We got a lot to cover, and now's the time to write down your questions and anything you need to know. We had 2 other webinars before, and this one kind of is like our third in our series in our Lunch and Learn. And yeah, if you have any questions, just type them up in the chat, the Q&A, and we'll make sure that Wes addresses them. But yeah, thank you for all for taking the time to join us on a Wednesday afternoon. And if you can, just type in the chat where you're joining us from. Say hello.
It's great to get a feel for where folks are from. We'll give them a couple more minutes.
Like they say in Mexico, hora mexicana, right? Hora latina. Hora latina.
This is hora alemán.
Okay, but Wes, I think it's 101. I think you can just go ahead and start with our housekeeping notes and all that. And
Terrific. That's great. Thank you, Ricardo. Look, I'd like to welcome everybody to the third of our webinar series on Medicare. Just a few organizational notes. We have a poll today. So if you get a chance, please participate. These polls really help us understand what people know, what they're interested in, and where they're at. On the line with me is our maestro of IT and all things presentations, Ricardo Masi. And with me, to make sure I don't wander too far afield, is my wife and partner, Martha Chapman. And again, welcome everybody to the Pathways presentation. Pathways are really all about, within Medicare, there are 2 pathways, which one you pick. A little bit on the organization today, Zoom chat and Q&A. We have a chat room, it's open. You can chat with each other, chat with Ricardo. I'm kind of talking, so I'm not paying too much attention to it. But Ricardo breaks in and lets me know what's going on. And please give us your questions. I think this should be an interesting presentation for folks today. A little bit about us, very quickly. We started 410 Health. We had a tough time coming into Medicare. It was 4 seniors that started it. We're all buddies, and we didn't know who to trust. So we started 410 Health. 410 means trust in Swedish. We're here to help serve you better. When it comes to pathways in Medicare, there are 2 pathways. That's the original Medicare pathway and the Medicare Advantage pathway. We'll get into what that means, but this is a really important issue, and there is no absolute right answer for expats, for snowbirds, for folks who spend a lot of time traveling. First, and I don't know if we got enough people yet on the call. It's only 12:03. Ricardo, you tell me, but do we have time, enough folks to get the poll going, or should we come back to it?
I think we can launch it.
Okay. In In terms of pathways, I got 4 questions here. There are some folks that I talked to who only have original Medicare and they're living outside the United States. Great, there's a reason for that. That makes sense for some people. Others have original Medicare and a supplement plus Part D. That has pluses and minuses, makes sense for some people. I have an Advantage plan. Again, an Advantage plan is a great tool for a lot of folks. We represent a lot of different Advantage plans, and I help a lot of people get enrolled in them. And then the third one is I have a Medicare pathway plus other insurance, medical evacuation, local medical coverage, et cetera. And that's for either pathway that you're on. I'm really interested in how many folks are using additional insurance products, particularly medical evacuation insurance and local medical coverage to augment what they're getting in Medicare. It's an important question and one that I'd really appreciate hearing from you. Who's doing what? So we've got original Medicare. We've only got a few people here, but other folks have an Advantage plan. Okay. Basics of Medicare pathways. There's original Medicare and Medicare Advantage. Medicare coverage starts by getting on one of these 2 pathways. 3 key considerations for it are cost, care access, and risk reduction. And really, you can pick any 2. All Medicare solutions grow out of a common Medicare Part A and Part B platform. Part A, if you'll recall, I'm just going to do this briefly because we've been over it, is free for most people. It's automatic at the age of 65. It covers hospital, certain nursing home costs, and hospice. It's got a complex deductible system and uncapped cost exposure. Part B is medical care, physician care. It costs a minimum of $164.90 a month. It's optional for people over the age of 65, although we strongly recommend that everyone maintain their Part B. It has onerous penalties if you don't. It covers doctor and diagnostic costs. It's really necessary for complete coverage. As I mentioned, there's severe penalties for not participating. This year, the annual deductible is pretty small. It's $226, down from last year where it was $233, but it has a 20% coinsurance, which is uncapped cost exposure. Pathways for snowbirds. The original Medicare pathway upgraded with a supplement in Part D. This is a great pathway. It's what Martha and I have. We spend a lot of time traveling, but we don't spend more than 60 days outside the United States and at a single time. There are 4 plans that have worldwide emergency care within Medigap. They're plans D, G, M, and N. These are all private insurer plans. The most popular by far is Plan G. That's what we have. And these plans cover what Medicare doesn't cover. They cover the deductibles and the co-pays to different degrees. These plans are accepted by all Medicare providers. Enrollment can be an issue. You've got 6 months after you get your Part B to enroll without medical underwriting. One of the great things about them is direct billing, which means limited headaches. And now for this crew, what's really important are the travel benefits. There's a $50,000 lifetime cap on emergency coverage with 20% coinsurance, excuse me, and a 60-day limit. We also strongly suggest a Part D plan, which has an expected monthly cost of $125 to $150. Part C, Medicare Advantage plans. These are managed care plans through private insurers. The government basically gives a fixed amount of money on a periodic basis over the course of the year to these carriers to provide for them to provide a managed care solution for the beneficiaries, you, us. These plans typically include a Part D coverage, and they include very commonly dental, vision, and hearing. They have a maximum out of pocket, which is really where, which provides the cap, your risk exposure. And these vary by legislative statute and by convention in a market. I've seen them as low, below $1,000 actually in Las Vegas. And over $11,000 is the maximum out of pocket specified by regulation. Very important thing about Medicare Advantage plans is they're available on a hyper-localized basis by zip code. Some of these plans, and we talk a lot about this with our customers, have great emergent and urgent care for extended travel outside the United States. This year, most plans in the United States have a zero premium. Okay. Coverage for snowbirds worldwide. Excuse me. It's important to understand how this insurance works. Both original Medicare with a supplement, remember, the worldwide coverage comes through the supplement. The worldwide emergency care coverage comes through the supplement. Or there is an urgent and emergent care for certain Advantage plans. Both pathways work on an indemnity basis. The rules of the road are that the beneficiary pays the bill, makes a submission to the carrier. Remember, the carrier is either the supplement provider or the Medicare Advantage plan, and gets reimbursed from that carrier, either the supplement carrier or the Medicare Advantage plan. It's important to understand, and there's been a lot of confusion about this, is that there is never direct billing from a foreign provider to U.S. Medicare Advantage or supplement insurers. They cannot pay that bill. They have no relationship to that provider. That provider and any relationship they may have with you, the insurer is not in the middle of. The insurer only has a relationship with the beneficiary. That's you, that's us. And they have agreed to pick up emergency coverage outside the United States. No foreign entity can accept Medicare. It's important to understand that. The concept of accepting Medicare means that there's acceptance on the other side that they will pay directly. That cannot happen. It never happens. And it's important that everybody on the call understand that the concept of accepting Medicare by a foreign provider outside the United States, with very few exceptions, and they're all, to the best of my knowledge, in Canada and associated with the Trans-Alaskan Highway. It's always you pay and get reimbursed. It's old style indemnity insurance. As a result, my advice to everybody is get receipts. If you have an emergency and you need care, call the insurer as soon as possible. You can imagine that if an insurer gets a big claim for thousands of dollars on a claim that they know nothing about, that generates an awful lot of questions when it's generated outside the United States. Please, as soon as you're in the hospital, as soon as you're ill, you or someone, a loved one, a family member, call the insurer and say, we have a situation, it's an emergency, this is what's going on. I want to make sure you know. That goes an awful long way of getting the insurer on your side. Second, call your credit card company and put a voice hold on any payments. The hospital will typically put a hold on enough money to provide whatever care is in question. Related to that is to get a written estimate if possible. Written estimates are critically important if you can get them and provide it back to the insurer. It goes an awful long way of saying, hey, this is what we're talking about. This is what the requirement for care is, and this is how much it's going to cost. And then finally, call me if you're my client. I help out people. Both Martha and I speak fluent Spanish, or actually she speaks fluent Spanish. I speak pretty good Spanish. But we can speak to the physician. We can speak to the hospital. We can help. But, so give us a call. Payment examples for each pathway. I just wanted to give some examples of what a payment might look like. I've had a lot of confusion, both in this enrollment season and over the course of the last year, of how do I get paid and when do I get paid and how does it work? I've said that these are both indemnity style plans and that they both require that you pay and get reimbursed. However, the calculation of how much you have to pay is very different between a supplement and the insurance that they're providing for emergency care outside the United States, and a Medicare Advantage plan, and the emergency and urgent coverage that they're providing outside the United States. Case one is a hospitalization and surgical repair of a compound fracture. You fell down, you were knocked down, something happened, you broke your leg or your arm, it's a terrible mess. And it's an emergent situation. There's absolutely no question about it, bone through skin. Let's assume in both cases that there is a bill for $10,250. I do this for easy calculation, which is 3 days in the hospital and the repair of the compound fracture. This involves surgery, this involves payment to physicians, etc. In the original Medicare pathway, through the supplement, remember, Medicare has no coverage. It is only either the supplement or the Medicare Advantage plan who are providing the coverage. In this case, the beneficiary pays the first $250,000. It is a deductible. That leaves a balance of $10,000. The beneficiary pays 20% of the $10,000 or $2,000, excuse me, for a total payment of $2,250. Now, the Medicare Advantage plan has a copay for emergency care. That copay I've seen in plans be from $0 to $125. That's what you pay for getting emergency care rendered outside the United States. In this case, we're assuming that there was 3 days in the hospital and repair of a compound fracture. The way Medicare Advantage plans work is they treat emergency care as in-network care. So the charges that you will be responsible for would be the co-payments and any co-insurance as if it was done on an in-network basis in a US hospital. This would include hospital daily charges. It would include surgical charges. It would include charges for specialists. But let's just say that your plan has a $250 a day copay for the first 5 days in the hospital. Well, you'd start out with $750. And it would go up from there as if you were an in-network situation in the United States getting the same thing done. What's important to understand is that it will be the same thing as if it had been an in-network occurrence in the United States. Another payment example for each pathway. Case 2 assumes an urgent care for suspected appendicitis. And I use this example a lot talking about urgent care versus emergency care. And I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and this had actually happened to them, where they thought they had appendicitis. They went to the hospital, and it turns out they did not have appendicitis. They did the tests and did the scans, and it turned out that they had a stomach bug. And they spent the night in the hospital and had various things done for them, and then went home. So let's assume that in the original, that in both cases, it's $1,000 bill. In this case, for the original Medicare pathway, if it is adjudicated by the plan to be urgent care, because there actually was not an emergency, you did not have appendicitis, you would pay the whole $1,000. On the Medicare Advantage pathway, in this case, there's a $125 copay. You didn't spend the night in the hospital. The balance is from your plan. Now, on the Medicare supplement pathway, the original Medicare pathway, if the plan accepted this as an emergency situation, that there was reason for you to suspect that you were very, very sick and that you did require treatment, you would pay the first $200, $250, excuse me. So there'd be $750. And then you would pay 20% and they would pay 80% of the remaining $750. So in the case of the original Medicare pathway, it could go one of two ways. Remember, it's a question of urgent versus emergency care. And in the Medicare Advantage plan pathway, they typically cover both urgent and emergent care, and it would be treated as an urgent care situation. Ricardo, we got any questions yet? I guess not.
Not yet, not yet.
Okay.
So we do have those that came in prior to the webinar that we could ask and answer.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's get through the webinar, and then additional pathway options for snowbirds. And this is a very important concept, and I'd like to go through it. Evacuation insurance is, for me, a critical part of a good plan for emergency coverage outside the United States. We were on a bicycle trip in Portugal at the end of September. It was a wonderful trip. And it was interesting. I was asking around, and every single person there, they were all seniors, had evacuation insurance. It's important to remember that emergency care will only cover charges until you are stabilized. Once you're stabilized, at that point, emergency care is no longer in effect, and you become an admitted patient of the hospital. At that point, if you have an evacuation plan, you can get on the plane and go home. And at that point, there is very little disagreement about the point of medical stabilization. You got on the plane as soon as you could, and you went home. It's a great option. These plans are typically pretty low cost. For a couple, they typically run $500 to $1,200 a year. They get complicated after the age of 74 because at that point, with a lot of the plans and the ones that we represent, you start to run into the requirement for medical underwriting. One of the things I wanted to put on the table was we recently got a question about the 3-doctor dilemma and being released for travel for medical evacuation. The question was, if you have a foreign doctor has you in the hospital, you have a doctor who represents the evacuation service that has to certify you as ready to travel. because it does put strain on the system, particularly the altitude. And then there's a doctor back in the United States getting ready to receive you when you show up. There was a question of, well, what if the foreign doctor won't release you? I've actually never heard of that happening. I understand how it could. There was the implication that it would happen because of financial issues. My experience is simply to tell them that the coverage ends now, and you'll get released to go. One of the things that we're seeing more of this year is extended trip insurance. There are a number of carriers that offer extended trip insurance. It's typically up to 6 months. These trip insurance plans require Medicare or other coverage as the prime insurer. They cover an awful lot of issues for in-country care, including medical, dental, and evacuation. The typical cost for these policies is surprisingly low. It's $1,000 to $1,500 for a 6-month period. That's for the entire period, not per month. They have low cost, and what we've seen is pretty low deductibles. Deductibles like $500, not $10,000 that you typically see on medical insurance policies. How can they afford to do this? Well, first, this is backup insurance for trips abroad. They don't go over 6 months, so you have to go back to your home and re-up. For some people, that's great, and it's pretty easy. For other people, it doesn't work at all. These types of policies do get more expensive as you get older, but for younger retirees, they're actually very inexpensive. And then just a summary. I thought I'd run through a quick summary of the pathways that we've covered today. Run through how they work and what they are, and then open things up for questions. The first pathway component is original Medicare. For most folks, the incremental cost is the Part B, which is $164.90 per month that's shown on the screen. Coverage for original Medicare, I have is very limited outside the United States. It's none outside the United States unless you happen to be on the Trans-Alaskan Highway. The important thing about original Medicare is that it is a requirement for all other types of coverage, including the trip insurance we were just talking about. The next pathway component I'd like to spend a minute on are Medicare Advantage plans. We've seen them expand from emergency care into emergency and urgent care in the last couple of years. The majority of plans in the United States that are Advantage plans have that this year. The premiums on Advantage plans are typically zero. Most plans now have zero premium. I've seen plans this year that go up over $250. This really depends on what's in your area and what you want in a plan. Today, about 65% of plans have worldwide emergency care. The issue associated with Medicare Advantage plans is being able to get that plan in your zip code in the United States. I keep very busy, Martha and I keep very busy looking for plans for folks because, you know, the zip code is here and the zip code is there, and the plans are completely different within 100 miles of each other. Medicare supplements are good for emergency care, not urgent care. They range from a low of $50 to I've seen $500 a month. The coverage they provide is for 60-day trips anywhere in the world. with a $500,000 lifetime cap, 20% coinsurance, and typically a $250 deductible. The plans that provide this are D, G, N, and M. If you're wondering what about Plan F, it's also in there. But Plan F is not available for people who came into Medicare after 1/1/20. I'm assuming that that's most of the people on this call. Plan G is by far the most popular. It's what I have. It's what Martha has. It's what we recommend typically for our customers. A pathway component that we think is important and we really strongly suggest you take a look at is evacuation insurance. It can be as little as $385 a year, and I've seen it, for older couples with medical issues at $2,500 per year. This is actually, these are programs, they're not actually classified as insurance. There are limitations on venue, age, health, and time away. So they have the same sorts of limitations and increased cost requirements that you'd see in a whole bunch of other medical insurance plans. I really like evacuation insurance because it integrates perfectly with the emergency coverage that's afforded through Advantage plans and supplements. When you're healthy and ready, healthy enough to go home, when you're stabilized, you're on a plane and you're going home. And to me, that's important. And finally, trip insurance. Trip insurance is something which has an incremental cost of $1,800 to $4,000 a year. The coverage is very broad. The deductibles are low. It does require Medicare as a primary insurer. But for folks who are looking for extra coverage for trips abroad with a maximum of 6 months, it's a really good alternative. So that's a summary talk about pathways, how they work, what's available, how they're calculated, and how they might work for you. Questions, Ricardo?
You must have nailed it with all the information. We haven't gotten questions yet, but I know you probably have a couple that you want to address that came in prior to the webinar. And
Right.
folks, just a reminder, if you want to type in your question for Wes, you got him here one-on-one. So just type it up. Oh, and now just as we said that, they're starting to trickle in. Just keep those handy, Wes, because I know some users, when they register, they have questions.
Okay.
Here's one that goes, who decides if I need to get flown home?
Excellent question. We represent MedJet. It's a fine company. They got a great reputation. But one of the reasons that we represent them is they have a sort of no-fault policy in terms of making the decision if you fly home. If you're in the hospital, you're being flown home. They might send a plane, or they might take you first class with an attendant. That depends on the severity of your condition. But if you're in the hospital, you're flying home with them. If you're not in the hospital, they're not responsible. And I think that's a pretty good way to make a decision, because they're not in the business of saying, well, no, you really don't need to. If you're in the hospital, you're going home. That's all there is to it. Other folks have other ways of making that determination. And it can lead to some difficult discussions. And we just prefer to leave that discussion entirely to the physicians. If you're sick enough to be in the hospital, you're sick enough to be flown home.
Great, thanks, Wes. Another question. Do you need a medical exam for evacuation insurance at age 74 if you already had the insurance before age 74?
It depends on the carrier. If you let me take a look at your plan, MedJet would require it. Once you turn 74, they require it for the next year. Other plans may not. we represent MedJet, but I'm happy to look at your policy and give you an interpretation of it. I know that certain companies are selling multi-year plans, and I'm sure that they extend past the age of 74. So you may have coverage from buying a multi-year policy.
Great, great. Another one came in. I am a permanent resident of Mexico. For trip insurance, can I spend 1 day in the US every 6 months to continually renew a trip insurance policy?
Yeah, it depends on the policy, but it really only requires a return home. So if you go back to the United States, you reset the meter, and it's the same thing with evacuation insurance. MedJet has a policy where you can either be out for 365 days or out for 6 months. And their requirement is you go back, you touch your toe, and you're good to go. So it depends on the policy, but typically, yes, you go, once you're back in the United States, you reset the clock and you can go back in. And, obviously, if you have a 6-month provision in your Medicare Advantage plan, and you're scrupulous about meeting it, it ties together very well.
Yeah. Next question. Is there a lot of difference in companies, both as to service and cost, that will get me home if I need due to illness?
Yes, without a doubt. And that's perhaps the most difficult thing to evaluate with these evacuation companies. When you think about it, very few people need the service, and they need it very rarely. And when we did the due diligence, we did talk to folks who had used it and said it worked pretty well. That's critically important, because you don't want to have a situation where you're stuck and you can't get picked up, and you paid and you've got a problem. Now, I will say that the trip insurance does include typically a provision for reimbursement of evacuation. And so in that circumstance, you can shop for evacuation. Now, that's kind of a difficult position to be in. You're sick, you're in the hospital, you don't have a lot of time, you're looking to get out of there, and you could end up spending a tremendous amount of money. Some of the folks I've spoken with coming back from Mexico to the United States, we're talking many tens of thousands of dollars. But the reimbursement is typically up to $50,000, so it should cover. But yeah, it's really important who you make that decision with, because you hope you never need it, but if you do need it, you actually really need it.
Great. We got people joining us from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I believe there's one. We might do something we've never done before. Ron, you have your hand raised. Would you still like to ask your question live? Oh, we lowered his hand. I guess we answered his question.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any other questions that you got before.
Anything going on in the chat that relates to questions, Ricardo?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Well, if that's it, we really appreciate everybody being on board today. There's no point to stretch this out longer than it needs to be. It's a 40-minute presentation at this point.
Wes, do you want to move to the next slide, please?
Yeah, I do. You're absolutely right. Do call us to discuss your options. We're here to help. That's me, Wes Chapman. You can also talk to Phil Mattingly or Martha Chapman. That's my number. You can go to our website, take a look. We've made it fairly easy to spend some time poking around in the insight section, a bunch of blogs about questions that folks have had, things that bothered me, candidly. And if you are interested, we put in place this year an enrollment form, one of the problems I had was I was concerned about confidentiality of data and HIPAA compliance, which are big issues. And we put in place a HIPAA compliant data gathering method so that if you put it in, it's safe, it's in a HIPAA compliant platform all the way to us and through us. So if you've got some questions, if you want a quote, if you want to learn more, send us a jot form. As always with Medicare, before we can give you any specific discussion, we need a scope of appointment. Remember, the scope of appointment is required by Medicare, and really all it does, it's for you to give us your permission to show you particular plans. It's designed for consumer protection. A lot of people are always, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that. And it's a good idea. And we try to really be careful about it. So if you want to talk about specific plans, we'll send you a scope of appointment. And once we have that in place, we're happy to go through in any degree of detail you want. We typically plow through a bunch of plans and go through them with you and figure out what the right fit is. For a lot of folks, drug coverage is a really important issue. And provider choice is an important issue, and it's complicated by the fact that you're spending a lot of time outside the United States. For most snowbirds, you can either have extremely simple, where it's really, I go to the United States for care once in a while. Most of the time I'm here in Mexico, or Costa Rica, Panama, wherever you may happen to be. For other folks, they're back in the United States on a routine basis. They really need the drug coverage, some expensive or esoteric drugs provided through the plans in the United States. And they really need specialists they need to see in the States. So for those people, it's really worth spending the time to make sure you get the right docs and the right coverage. Anyway, that's us. That's who we are. That's what we do. That's how we do it. I'd like to thank everybody for being on the call today. Thanks, Ricardo, for
you got it, Wes. And perhaps do you want to talk about what we're going to be doing in November, what we're looking into presenting? Yeah.
One of the things I appreciate some feedback from folks in the field. I'm thinking about putting on sales presentations for the individual plans that for some of the individual plans that we represent. I think I represent 12 or 15 different carriers, but there are 4 or 5 that are the principal ones. And if people would like a sales presentation, these are kabuki dance. They're extremely highly scripted. And it's a bit of a pain in the neck to put them on. I need to give advance notice and so forth and so on. So it won't happen next week. But one thing I was thinking is there may be a general interest in going through an example plan from one of the major carriers, from each of the major carriers that we represent, just because people would be interested in understanding more. And I think that, our principal value is through education, but we do want to make sure that people get into the right plans. And so if we did that, it would be kind of a compressed 1 or 2 week period where we went through a bunch of presentations so people could then make a decision. Let me know if you're interested in that. I'm certainly willing to do it. It's a little bit of brain damage chasing it all down, but I think it might be worthwhile. I know folks are a long ways away, and typically, and in-person presentations just aren't possible. So the only way to get this is a virtual presentation. And most of the carriers have been great about making virtual presentations legal and possible. So if folks are interested, I'll put them on.
Great. Well, thank you, Wes. Thank you for everybody in attendance. This has been a great 3 weeks. I hope you guys found all this content informative. This will be recorded and it will be just distributed to your email box, I think tomorrow. And we'll also put these recordings of these webinars on our YouTube channel. So be on the lookout for that.
And where are the Calendly access, Ricardo?
Yes, so in the chat, I just shared a link where you guys can book time with Wes right here. I'm going to share it again. Yeah, it's a very easy link. It pops up the calendar, the availabilities of when Wes is available, and you can select which time, and it books it in a couple of clicks, and you already no strings attached meeting with Wes. Just explain your situation. Then you guys can take it from there. But yeah, the link is in the chat. Be sure to click on it and visit and book some time with Wes so he can show how he can help you.
Those are great for me because, you know, it gives me a chance to get ready and talk to folks. And if they're interested in providing additional information before the meeting and or signing a scope of appointment, it can get fairly specific. But it's an easy way for me to accommodate people who are interested in learning more. So please, if you're interested in learning more, let's get on the calendar and have a visit. I really appreciate it.
We're already getting feedback on the sales presentation. Would be a great idea, very valuable. So
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's one of those things. I've always worried about people not getting enough information, and I'd really like to do it with the concept behind it that it's, from our perspective, really educational. I want folks to understand what the carriers have, how their plans work, and to me, that's an important concept of being an informed consumer.
yeah, fantastic.
Okay, well, look, I really appreciate everybody being on board. This has been a fun thing for me. It's forced me to be a little organized in my thinking and in terms of putting together presentations that I hope you found beneficial. I know that a lot of folks have watched them. Anything that we can do to make them better in the future, let me know. We're in the business of getting better. Anything that we can answer for you, please let me know. We're in the business of answering questions. Thank you so much for your time. I really mean that sincerely. We'll see about doing some sales presentations for the major carriers, and have a great Wednesday afternoon.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you again. Thank you, Wes.
You bet. Bye-bye.